Well, US investigators are still trying to find out the reasons behind the crash, but what we do know about the last moments of the flight are pretty sketchy at this point. Earlier, I asked CNN's Richard Quest, who is an aviation expert, to go through those final moments with me and talk us through what we believe at least happened at this point.
By the time we get to 73 seconds before impact, the autopilot has been disengaged, so they are hand-flying the aircraft. And the auto throttle, think of that as a glorified cruise control. That is regulating the speed of the engines. But there's a lot of confusion over whether it was engaged or whether it was armed or the status of that. And they didn't seem to concentrate on that much. So we move forward. And at 34 seconds before impact, look at the speed. The speed has now dropped below what it should be. It's 3 knots below what it should be. And the pilot in the left seat notices the plane is flying too low. The pilot flying says he sees a flash of light. We don't know what it is.
We know nothing about that at this point.
But this is the point, Becky. This is the point where if they'd called for a go-around and actually put the full power on, they've still got enough speed. They're low and they're slow. But if the one in the left-hand seat, the captain, had called for a go-around then, they'd have stood... Well, I mean, it would have been a very different story. But they don't. They continue at 16 seconds. Now the speed is really bleeding off quite sharply. And the pilot notices, the pilot flying, he's not on the centre line. That's the centre line, right in the middle. The importance of this, again, even though it's slow, they could have called for a go-around. And when you go around, you literally push the thrust levers as far forward as you can, gaining toga power, take-off, go-around power. But they didn't. They carried on the approach. And the speed continues to bleed off. And by the time you get to this point, when they do call go-around, you just don't have the power. You don't have the power to defeat the stall that the plane is now in.
So we've got this situation, and the evacuation from this takes something like a minute and a half. Your sense of whether that works or not?
The problem with this is it's not the evacuation takes a minute and a half, but the evacuation didn't begin for a minute and a half. Because now what we know is that, and this is what is turning into an extraordinary aspect, the flight attendant asked the captain, should I evacuate the aircraft? And he said, wait. And according to Deborah Hertzman, and she says it's unusual, according to Deborah Hertzman, the chair of the NTSB, it took a minute and a half before they started the evacuation.
Let's have a listen to what we know.
기내 방송으로요. 저희가 우선은
First, after the plane stopped completely, I went into the cockpit to see whether the captain was alive or not. I knocked the cockpit door, the captain opened it, and I asked, "Are you okay, Captain?" And he said, "Yes, I'm okay." I asked, "Should I perform evacuation?" And he told me to wait.
And the thing is, an aircraft is designed to be evacuated in 90 seconds with half the doors inoperable. That's the certification regulation. And most pilots, look at the British Airways crash at Heathrow with the doors on the engines. Again, as soon as that plane was on the ground, they evacuated. So what the question for the authorities will be is this. Never mind why it crashed, but once it crashed, why didn't the captain immediately avoid